She spent 41 years married to a man who touched her twice. Not twice a year. Twice, total, at the very start, and then decades of silence she convinced herself was just the demands of fame. When Carol Channing finally filed for divorce at 77, she didn't just lose a husband, she uncovered a lifetime of stolen money and a secret second life. And she's not alone. Judy Garland was walked down the aisle by the man who orchestrated her entire deception. A teenage Angela Lansbury came home to an empty closet and a goodbye note. A princess traded a crown for a trap nobody warned her about. These weren't unlucky women. They were props in a decades-long cover-up machine, and what happened behind their closed doors will change how you see every perfect, old Hollywood photo you've ever scrolled past. Number 1. Rock Hudson, the business deal disguised as a wedding. Let's start with the marriage that reads less like a romance and more like a corporate acquisition. In 1955, Rock Hudson was Universal's biggest moneymaker, and also its biggest liability. Tabloids were circling, and his agent, Henry Wilson, needed a fix fast. His solution was sitting right outside his office, his own secretary, Phyllis Gates. Within weeks, she and Hudson were married in a Santa Barbara motel room, a wedding with all the spontaneity of a boardroom merger. Here's where it gets murky. For decades, Gates swore she was simply a woman in love, blindsided completely. But plenty of industry insiders find that hard to swallow. She worked for the man whose entire job was managing Hudson's secret. Was she really oblivious, or was she handed a script and told to perform it? Historians still argue both sides, and honestly, both versions are unsettling in their own way. What's not in dispute is what the marriage demanded of her. She hosted dinners. She smiled for photographers. She played the adoring wife on command while, behind the scenes, her husband grew distant and absent. 3 years later it ended. Hudson walked away untouched, his leading man image fully intact. Gates walked away carrying the public shame of a failed marriage she may have either been tricked into or quietly hired to protect. Either way, she paid a price Hudson never did. And if you think that's cold, wait until you hear how a studio boss literally gave away one of the most famous women in the world like a piece of property, on camera, in front of the entire press corps. Number 2. Judy Garland, the bride who was handed off like property. In 1945, Judy Garland married director Vincente Minnelli, and the moment was staged for maximum spectacle. Studio chief Louis B. Mayer personally walked her down the aisle. It looked like a fairy tale. It was actually a handoff. MGM already controlled everything about Garland, her work hours, the pills that kept her upright on set, even the version of reality she was allowed to believe in. Minnelli seemed like a safe artistic match. He'd made her glow on screen in Meet Me in St. Louis, and executives pushed the union hard. What they conveniently left out was Minnelli's history with men during his years in New York theater. Hollywood needed a wholesome story, and Garland, without knowing it, was cast as the trusting bride in someone else's cover-up. She expected the kind of romance her own films promised audiences. Instead, she got a marriage that quietly hollowed out in front of her, ending, by her own account, when she walked in on her husband with another man. The illusion didn't crack slowly. It shattered all at once. The real damage went deeper than one bad marriage. Growing up entirely inside the studio's system had trained Garland to equate love with image management, making her an easy target for men who needed her fame more than they wanted her. Years later, husband number 4, Mark Herron, left her for the same reason. Garland wasn't unlucky in love. She was raised inside a machine that used marriage as a publicity tool, and she paid for that machine's convenience over and over again. But not every version of this story involves studio executives pulling strings. Number 3. Angela Lansbury was 19 when she came home one day to find her husband gone. No fight, no warning, just a short note from actor Richard Cromwell saying the marriage was over. He'd packed up and disappeared. They'd married less than a year earlier, in 1945. Lansbury was a British newcomer who'd already scored an Oscar nomination for Gaslight. Cromwell, 35 and established, represented the sophistication and stability a young foreigner in Hollywood desperately wanted. She fell for the polish without realizing how much of it was performance. This wasn't a studio arrangement built to protect box office numbers. It was smaller and more personal. Cromwell needed a respectable young wife to quiet rumors following him around town. Lansbury, sheltered by her age and the era's rigid norms, simply had no framework for what was happening. She later said plainly that it never once crossed her mind her husband might be gay. The devastation wasn't just about losing a partner. It was realizing she'd been performing in a play she was never given the script for. And yet, in an industry that thrived on destroying people through scandal, she chose the opposite path, protecting Cromwell's privacy for decades and quietly absorbing a brutal early lesson about the gap between Hollywood's surface and what lived underneath it. Not every woman on this list was left in the dark, though. Some walked in with their eyes open, and chose to stay anyway. For the wife who knew, and stayed anyway. Barry Berenson wasn't a sheltered ingenue. She was a fashion photographer plugged into New York's art scene when she met Anthony Perkins in 1972, a man whose private life had long been tangled up in Hollywood's hidden gay circles. Given how connected and perceptive she was, it's hard to believe she hadn't heard the long-running rumors about the psycho star. What made their marriage different wasn't ignorance. It was sacrifice. Berenson appears to have known, and chosen the arrangement anyway, trading her freewheeling bohemian life for strict boundaries in exchange for giving Perkins the stable, conventional family image he wanted, and a shield from a public that would have destroyed him. But protecting someone's secret means absorbing every hit meant for them. When the AIDS epidemic swept through the following decade, the danger around Perkins' hidden life stopped being about his career and became a matter of life and death. Berenson didn't leave. She turned their home into a fortress, standing between her husband's failing health and a press desperate to expose him, quietly setting her own story aside so his could stay intact. Some wives found out through betrayal. Others walked in already knowing. And then there were the ones who built an entire life together anyway, redefining what a marriage could even mean. Number 5. Charlotte Rae betrayed after 25 years. Charlotte Rae spent 25 years married to composer John Strauss, raising 2 sons and building what looked like one of the most stable, ordinary marriages in show business, long before she became beloved as Mrs. Garrett on The Facts of Life. A quarter-century marriage isn't a quick studio stunt. It's an entire chapter of a person's life. That's what made the ending so brutal. There was no tabloid leak, no rumor. Strauss simply told her the truth himself. Well into middle age, he was attracted to men, and he wanted an open marriage to keep their family structure while exploring a part of himself he'd suppressed for decades. For Rae, there was no strategic arrangement to negotiate, just total blindsiding after 25 years of trust. That kind of late-life revelation doesn't just change your future, it rewrites your past. Every holiday, every quiet dinner, suddenly needed re-examining. She ultimately ended the marriage rather than accept a rewritten version of her own life. But she never publicly attacked Strauss. She simply, privately, had to rebuild her sense of who she'd actually been married to for half her adult life. Some secrets take decades to surface. Others were hiding in plain sight the entire time, if you knew where to look. Number 6. Elsa Lanchester. The 33-year arrangement nobody talked about. Elsa Lanchester didn't uncover her husband's secret through gossip or scandal. She noticed it in the quiet absence of intimacy in her own home. She and Charles Laughton were both eccentric, brilliant British actors trying to survive 1930s Hollywood's image machine. A couple of years into the marriage, Laughton finally admitted he was exclusively attracted to men, a confession that could have meant prison in England and career death in America. Lanchester faced an impossible choice: end things and risk exposing him, or rebuild her entire idea of what their life together would look like. She chose to stay, and what followed was a 33-year partnership that broke every rule of conventional marriage. They didn't separate. They became devoted collaborators and companions, with Lanchester shifting from wife to willing co-conspirator. That doesn't mean it was painless. Choosing to stay meant giving up any chance at the romantic life she'd once pictured for herself. She spent decades as his closest friend and muse, but never as someone who received the love she'd originally hoped for. Every day required careful management to keep his private life hidden from the studios and the press. Lanchester wasn't a naive victim, and she wasn't just a PR shield either. She engineered their survival, deciding that protecting Lawton's career was worth a lifetime of loneliness with no script and no ending. Some women managed this kind of arrangement for life. Others discovered it decades in, and by then, it was almost impossible to survive the shock. Number 7. Janet Gaynor. The marriage everyone quietly understood. When Janet Gaynor, the first ever Best Actress Oscar winner, married MGM star costume designer Gilbert Adrian in 1939, the press sold it as a fairy tale. Adrian dressed Garbo and designed Dorothy's ruby slippers. Together, they were Hollywood royalty. But Gaynor wasn't some naive bride caught off guard. She was already an industry veteran, and inside Hollywood's tight inner circle, Adrian's homosexuality was something close to an open secret. Historians increasingly view their marriage not as deception, but as a genuine lavender marriage, a strategic alliance built for mutual protection. Here's the twist. Persistent rumors about Gaynor's own close relationship with actress Mary Martin suggest she may have needed the cover just as much as Adrian did. If true, this wasn't one person fooling another. It was two people navigating an intolerant era together, building a real partnership wrapped in a mandatory public performance, complete with a son, lavish entertaining, and a united front that kept gossip columnists at bay for years. And speaking of arrangements everyone quietly went along with, one of the most extreme examples of this wasn't in Hollywood at all. It was inside the British royal family. Number 8. Princess Margaret. The trap disguised as a fairy tale wedding. In 1960, Princess Margaret married photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones in a ceremony watched by over 300 million people, the first globally televised royal wedding. For the monarchy, still recovering from the scandal of Margaret being forbidden to marry Peter Townsend, this wedding was desperately needed good PR. Armstrong Jones, with his bohemian charm, seemed like the perfect modern answer. But where Hollywood studios carefully engineered these arrangements to protect profits, Buckingham Palace operated on pure institutional arrogance, simply assuming that anyone let into the royal inner circle would fall in line without question. Margaret didn't escape the constraints of the crown by marrying him. She traded one kind of trap for another, one nobody had warned her about, and one that would unravel in ways the palace never anticipated. Which brings us back to where we started, a woman who thought she'd built 41 years of partnership, only to discover it had been a performance almost from day one. Number 10. Sean Connery. Few actors have ever defined masculinity on screen quite like Sean Connery. As the first actor to bring James Bond to life on the big screen, Connery became the gold standard for the world's most famous secret agent. His confident demeanor, unmistakable voice, and effortless charm turned him into an international icon. But beyond the tuxedos, fast cars, and unforgettable one-liners, another layer of mystery followed him throughout his career, one fueled by decades of Hollywood gossip rather than verified fact. After the release of the early Bond films in the 1960s, Connery's popularity skyrocketed. He wasn't just admired for his acting ability, he became one of the era's biggest sex symbols. Fans around the world were captivated by his rugged good looks and commanding screen presence, while entertainment magazines eagerly covered every detail of his personal life. Alongside stories of his romances came persistent whispers suggesting that his legendary appeal extended beyond charisma alone. Friends, insiders, and celebrity gossip columns occasionally repeated claims about his physical attributes, though none of these stories were ever confirmed by credible evidence. What made the rumors even more enduring was Connery's personality. He rarely addressed sensational claims or felt the need to defend his private life, allowing speculation to flourish. His confidence, combined with an air of mystery, encouraged people to believe almost anything about the man behind the Bond persona. As with many Golden Age legends, silence often proved more powerful than denial. Yet reducing Sean Connery's legacy to Hollywood gossip would overlook the extraordinary career he built. Beyond James Bond, he delivered acclaimed performances in films such as The Untouchables, The Hunt for Red October, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and The Rock, earning an Academy Award and the respect of audiences across generations.